I was folding my grandson's school uniforms, the smell of freshly laundered clothes filling the room, when I heard the suitcase hit the bedroom floor upstairs. It was a jarring sound, a hard, abrupt thud that sent a wave of dread through my chest. The sound echoed down the narrow hallway of our old Victorian house in Springfield, reverberating off the creaking walls like a gunshot. Every corner of this house had seen its share of memories, some happy, some sad, but this sound felt like the breaking of something I wasn't ready to acknowledge. Something I had tried to ignore for too long. At 67, I had learned to trust my instincts. The same instincts that guided me through years of teaching, helping students overcome their struggles, those same instincts were screaming warnings I didn't want to hear. I had faced challenges before, but none like this. My hands trembled slightly as I set down Mason's pressed white shirt, the fabric soft beneath my fingers. With a sigh, I climbed the stairs, each step groaning under my weight as if the house itself were trying to tell me something. I reached the top of the stairs and found Craig's bedroom door wide open. The sight hit me harder than I expected. Craig was shoving clothes into his black travel bag with the frantic efficiency of someone fleeing a fire, no folding, no organization, just stuffing things in. His work laptop was open on the unmade bed, a glow from multiple browser windows casting a cold, unwelcoming light across the room. This wasn't just packing. This was him preparing to leave. Going somewhere? I asked, my voice catching in the silence. He didn't look up, didn't even pause. It was as if I were a ghost, one who didn't matter anymore. Business trip, he muttered, his voice hollow. Last-minute thing. The lie hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Craig worked in tech support for a local computer repair company. They didn't send him on business trips. They barely sent him to the office downtown. For how long? I pressed, though deep down I already knew the answer. Not sure yet, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper as he grabbed his toiletries from the dresser, knocking over a framed photo of Linda holding newborn Mason. The glass cracked against the hardwood floor, but Craig stepped over it without even glancing down. My heart clenched. That photo had sat in the same spot for as long as I could remember. It had been the last photo taken of Linda before she passed away, giving birth to Mason. Craig used to kiss his fingertips and touch the frame every night before bed. Now, he walked past it as if it were just another piece of debris on the floor, something that had lost all meaning to him. Craig, stop, I said, my voice trembling as I moved into the room. Talk to me. What's really happening here? Finally, he turned to face me. What I saw in his eyes chilled me to the bone. There was no guilt, no sadness, no connection, only cold determination and something that almost resembled relief. It was a look I hadn't seen in years. I'm leaving, Mom, he said, his voice flat. I should have done this years ago. The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the breath out of me. All those years of raising his son while he buried himself in his grief. More than a decade of being the mother Mason needed, while Craig slowly disappeared into his computer screens and late-night activities that I had chosen not to question. I had been the one holding our fractured family together with my teacher's pension and grandmother's love. And now it was all unraveling in front of me. What about Mason? I asked, my voice small as I fought to keep the panic at bay. He's better off with you, Craig answered flatly, as though it was nothing more than a fact. He always has been. Craig zipped the suitcase with a finality that made the sound echo through the house. It was almost as if it were marking the end of something, our family, our past, our future. The sound R reverberated through the walls, probably reaching Mason's room where he was supposedly doing his homework. I couldn't bring myself to move. The words hung between us, a weight neither of us could shake. You can't just abandon your son. I'm not abandoning him, Craig retorted, his voice colder now. I'm leaving him with the person who actually raised him. The casual cruelty of his words left me speechless. He turned and began heading toward the stairs, dragging the suitcase behind him. I followed, my slippers catching on the worn carpet runner, as though the house itself were trying to hold me back, to stop me from following him. In the living room, Mason sat at the antique desk, quietly doing his algebra homework, his back to the door. When we entered, he looked up, his intelligent brown eyes scanning the scene, his father with a suitcase and my panicked expression. The weight of it all hung in the air like a storm about to break. "Going somewhere, Dad?" Mason asked, his voice calm but sharp, like a blade cutting through the tension. Craig paused at the front door. For a moment, I saw his resolve waver, his gaze lingering on Mason. It was a fleeting moment, one where I thought he might actually hesitate. I saw a flash of something, regret, maybe, or perhaps the faintest flicker of a connection to the child he was abandoning. Mason had grown tall and lean, like Craig had been at that age, but there was something about the way Mason looked at him now that was different. There was no anger, no pleading. Just a quiet acceptance that I wasn't sure Mason fully understood himself. But he wasn't going to beg. He was too smart for that. "I need some time away, buddy," Craig said finally, his voice softer, but there was no real apology in it. "Grandma will take care of you." "For how long?" Mason asked, his voice carrying a mix of curiosity and concern that, at his age, was unsettling. He was still only 13, but in that moment, he seemed so much older than his years. Craig looked at him, his jaw tightening. "I don't know yet," he muttered, and with that, he turned and stepped out the door, leaving behind a trail of silence that felt heavier than anything I had ever known. The door closed behind him with a soft click, but it might as well have been the sound of the world falling apart. I watched him walk to his car, his silver Honda, the one he'd bought just after Linda died, and load the suitcase into the trunk. My heart felt like it was sinking in my chest as I watched him drive away, the engine's hum growing fainter, until it was swallowed by the October air. In the living room, the grandfather clock ticked steadily, a metronome marking the passage of time that seemed suddenly too fast. Too empty. The silence between Mason and me was heavy. The furnace hummed to life, but it was a noise that seemed as distant as the car engine fading into the night. Mason sat there for a long moment, staring at the space where his father had been. I watched him, my heart breaking for the boy who was so much more than his years, and yet so vulnerable. He looked up at me, his face unreadable, his eyes reflecting something deeper than sorrow. Something quieter. Something more resigned. "Is he coming back?" Mason asked. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was enormous. I wanted to lie. I wanted to protect him from the truth that was already settling in my bones. But Mason was too smart for that. I could see it in his eyes, the same quiet understanding that had settled there when he was just a little boy, watching the world through a lens that was both innocent and somehow wise. He was more aware of the situation than I gave him credit for. "I don't think so, sweetheart," I said softly, my voice thick with emotion. He nodded once, slowly, and closed his algebra book. Neatly, methodically, he stacked it on top of the other textbooks on the desk, as if this small action could give him some sense of control in a world that had just shattered. Then, without another word, he stood up and walked toward the stairs. "Mason, wait," I called out, my voice trembling with the panic I didn't want him to see. "What are you going to do?" He turned, the faintest smile tugging at the corners of his lips. It was a strange smile, serene, almost knowing. "I'll handle this, Grandma." The words hit me with an unexpected force. Handle this? My 13-year-old grandson? What could he possibly handle? What did he even mean? But something in his tone made me stop. There was no bravado, no attempt to comfort me or convince me he was okay. He wasn't pretending. He was simply stating a fact. A fact that felt both comforting and terrifying. He knew something I didn't, and for the first time, I wondered if Mason was the one holding us all together now. "What do you mean?" I asked, stepping closer to him. His steady gaze met mine, and I saw in his eyes something that sent a chill down my spine. Something that didn't belong to a 13-year-old boy. A quiet, relentless determination. "I need to check our bank accounts first," he said, almost offhandedly. "Then we'll know exactly what we're dealing with." Bank accounts. The weight of those words felt like an anchor being dropped into my stomach. My 13-year-old grandson was talking about checking bank accounts, and I realized, in that moment, I hadn't even thought of that. My mind had been too focused on Craig's departure, on the emotional devastation. But Mason was thinking ahead, thinking about survival. My heart twisted as I watched him climb the stairs, already heading into the unknown, leaving me behind in the shadows of a life I didn't fully understand. I stood there in the silence of the house, suddenly acutely aware of how empty it felt. The creaking of the floorboards beneath my feet, the hum of the furnace, the ticking of the grandfather clock, it all felt like the world was shifting, moving without me. A future I couldn't see stretched out before me, filled with too many unknowns. Later that night, long after Mason had gone to bed, I found myself awake in the stillness of our home. I lay in my bed, unable to sleep, every creak and groan of the house magnified in the quiet darkness. The house felt as though it were settling into a new chapter, one I didn't want to begin. And then, just as I was drifting off, I heard it, the soft clicking of computer keys coming from Mason's room. The sound was steady, purposeful, like someone typing with intent. It wasn't the sort of noise I expected from a boy who should have been fast asleep by now. I could feel the tension rising in my chest as I slipped out of bed and padded down the hallway in my bathrobe and slippers, my footsteps muffled against the old hardwood floor. I paused outside his door. Light seeped from beneath the frame, and the rhythmic tapping of keys continued, steady and unrelenting. I knocked gently, my voice trembling with concern. "Mason, it's past midnight, sweetheart." "Come in, Grandma," he called from inside. There was no urgency in his tone, just calm invitation. I opened the door and found him sitting at his desk, fully dressed, his face illuminated by the glow of the screen. Surrounding him were notebooks, printed papers, and bank statements. A faint chill ran down my spine as I took in the sight of it all, an overwhelming spread of documents, data streams, and things I couldn't even begin to understand. "What are you doing up so late?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Research," he said without hesitation. He gestured to the papers scattered across his desk, papers that I realized were far more than schoolwork. His fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up windows that I could barely comprehend. "I've been going through Dad's digital footprints for the past 3 hours," he said. "Looking for patterns." Digital footprints. The term felt foreign to me, like something out of a movie. I stepped closer, my eyes scanning the documents he had laid out, trying to make sense of them. There were bank statements, credit reports, what looked like email printouts, all bearing our family name. "Mason, where did you get all of this?" I asked, my heart starting to race. Mason glanced up at me, his expression calm but focused. "Dad isn't very careful with his passwords," he said matter-of-factly. It wasn't hard to figure out. I took a step closer to Mason's desk, my mind racing as I tried to comprehend the enormity of what he was saying. His room was eerily quiet, except for the steady click-clack of his fingers moving across the keys. I had raised him to be resourceful, but I never imagined that, at 13, he would be doing something like this. "Mason," I said, my voice tight with fear and disbelief. "You hacked into your father's email?" Mason didn't flinch. He just kept typing, his eyes never leaving the screen. "Technically, Grandma," he said without looking up, "I just logged in using his password. It's not hacking if he left the door unlocked." The calmness in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. This was no longer just a curious boy poking around. Mason was uncovering something far deeper than I could have ever imagined, and my heart sank as the pieces started to fall into place. "What have you found?" I asked, dreading the answer but knowing I had to ask. Mason's fingers paused for a moment, and he turned the laptop towards me. On the screen were several documents, bank statements, credit reports, and email printouts that detailed transactions I couldn't fully understand. His face was a mask of calm concentration as he began explaining. Mason scrolled through more documents. "A lot worse," he said quietly. "They've been planning this for months. Creating fake documents, forging signatures, they've been using our information to steal from us and other people too. And it's not just us. They've been targeting elderly clients at her job. People like you, Grandma." My heart twisted in my chest. I felt a sense of betrayal so deep it was almost physical. Not just from Craig, but from this woman he had brought into our lives. "What kind of loans?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, bracing for the worst. Mason clicked to another document on the screen. "A $30,000 personal loan using your name and social security number," he said, his voice tight with anger. "And a $15,000 credit card application using my social security number, listing me as 25 years old. They forged all the signatures, Grandma. This is identity theft. They're using us to fund their escape." I sat back in the chair, the weight of it all crashing down on me. My son had stolen our identities, he had taken everything from us. And now, with Vanessa, they were building a new life on the backs of innocent, vulnerable people. I could barely breathe, the betrayal cutting deeper than I ever thought possible. "How do you know all of this?" I asked, my voice hollow. "How did you figure it out?" Mason looked at me, his eyes serious. "I've been watching Dad for weeks. His behavior, he kept hiding things, closing his laptop when I walked into the room, getting secretive when certain emails came in. Something felt wrong. So I started paying attention. And then I taught myself how to track his digital footprint. It wasn't that hard once I knew what to look for." I stared at him, my mind struggling to catch up. This wasn't just about Mason being smart. This was about him being forced to grow up, to take on responsibilities that no child should have to bear. He was teaching himself cybersecurity to fight back against the man who was supposed to protect him. "Mason, this is illegal," I said, the words thick with disbelief. "What they've done, this is criminal." Mason nodded. "I know, Grandma. That's why I documented everything. Every transaction. Every forged document. Every fake account. I have proof of all of it." He opened a folder on his laptop, and my breath caught as I saw the dozens of files, screenshots, bank records, and email exchanges between Craig and Vanessa. They were going to disappear together, start a new life somewhere, taking our money with them. "I'm not just protecting us," Mason said, his voice calm but fierce. "I'm making sure they face consequences for what they've done. All of it. Not just to us, but to other families too." We're continuing to build tension here as Mason takes charge of the situation. His quiet yet unshakable resolve contrasts with the grandmother's shock and grief, highlighting the complexity of the situation. I'll keep adding layers to their interactions and the unfolding of their plan for justice.